Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Young and the Restless channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The tension hanging over the Young and the Restless was about to explode in every direction as Friday, May 8th unfolded with secrets, emotional confrontations, and dangerous choices that threatened to drag everyone deeper into chaos. The aftermath of Las Vegas still lingered like smoke after a fire, refusing to disappear no matter how desperately people tried to move on. In the middle of it all stood Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson, whose fragile attempt at rebuilding trust suddenly found itself tested once again by the shadow of another woman. Chelsea could not shake the images from her mind after everything that happened in Vegas, especially the way Reza Thompson had flaunted her supposed connection to Spider with confidence and flirtation. The questions had been building inside Chelsea ever since they returned home, and now they finally demanded answers. There was an unmistakable tension in the air as Chelsea confronted Adam, her eyes searching his face for even the slightest crack in the story he had been trying to hold together. She needed to know how far the charade had gone, because even though Adam claimed it was all part of a dangerous game, the emotional scars left behind felt painfully real. Adam suddenly found himself cornered, forced to explain pieces of his past and the role he had played while trapped inside the reckless world of Spider. The atmosphere between them grew heavy as Chelsea pressed harder, refusing to let vague reassurances satisfy her fears. Adam eventually admitted that there had been kisses between him and Reza, but he insisted every moment had been nothing more than performance, carefully staged to maintain the illusion he needed everyone to believe. Even so, the confession landed like a blow, and Chelsea struggled to hide the hurt flickering across her face. The memory of Reza hinting about taking things further lingered in Chelsea's mind like poison, and she needed to hear Adam deny it directly before her imagination consumed her completely. Adam assured her that despite Reza's teasing suggestions about the bedroom, he had never intended to cross that line. He told Chelsea that the reckless man called Spider may once have lived for danger, thrills, and meaningless connections, but that version of himself no longer existed the way it once had. Now, according to Adam, the only thing that mattered was the future he wanted with Chelsea and Connor Newman, a future built on stability, family, and a love he desperately hoped was strong enough to survive the damage already done. While Adam fought to convince Chelsea that their relationship was still worth believing in, another storm was quietly forming elsewhere. Nick Newman found himself pulled toward a moment that could change everything when his eyes drifted toward the GCAC bar. Across the room sat Phyllis Summers, locked in conversation with Matt Clark, a man whose very presence carried danger and unanswered questions. The moment felt almost surreal, as though fate itself were preparing to ignite another collision between past and present. Nick's instincts immediately sharpened, tension rising in his chest as suspicion and anger threatened to take over. If he approached Matt directly, the confrontation could spiral instantly, especially if Matt once again tried to hide behind claims of amnesia. That possibility alone threatened to throw Nick into confusion and frustration, because nothing about Matt's return felt accidental or innocent. Yet the crowded room created uncertainty, with other people moving around the bar and partially blocking Nick's view, leaving open the possibility that he might walk away before fully realizing who was sitting there. The uncertainty surrounding Matt's return only added to the emotional pressure crushing everyone involved. Whether Nick recognized him or not, it was clear the truth could not stay buried forever. Eventually, Nick would come face to face with Victoria Newman, and what he revealed to her promised to shake the Newman family to its core. Behind closed doors, and away from the chaos of the public eye, Nick was expected to finally open up about the terrifying reality of his recent struggles. The secret he had been carrying was far darker than most people realized, because Vegas had nearly destroyed him completely. Victoria could soon learn about Nick's drug addiction and the horrifying truth that he had come dangerously close to dying while trapped in that destructive spiral. The emotional weight of that confession threatened to hit Victoria with devastating force, forcing her to confront just how much her brother had been suffering in silence. For Nick, admitting the truth would not simply be about sharing information. It would mean exposing the most vulnerable and broken parts of himself, the parts he had desperately tried to hide behind strength and control. At the same time, concern continued to grow around Phyllis as her choices became increasingly reckless and unpredictable. Lauren Fenmore Baldwin once again found herself sounding the alarm, deeply worried that Phyllis was moving toward disaster without realizing how dangerous the situation had become. Lauren could sense the legal drama escalating around them, and every new development seemed to pull Phyllis deeper into instability rather than toward safety. Depending on how much Lauren managed to piece together about Matt and his twisted behavior, her fears could intensify even further. Watching Phyllis interact with someone as dangerous and manipulative as Matt created a growing sense of dread, because Phyllis had always been known for making impulsive, emotional decisions when backed into a corner. There was a painful inevitability hanging over everything, as though every warning sign was pointing toward another catastrophic fallout waiting just around the corner. Even the smallest choices suddenly carried enormous consequences, and the emotional tension surrounding Phyllis continued to build with every passing moment. As the drama intensified across Genoa City, the emotional threads connecting all these lives tightened into something almost impossible to escape. Relationships stood on fragile ground, old identities refused to stay buried, and dangerous secrets threatened to erupt into public view at any second. Adam struggled to prove he had truly changed. Chelsea fought to believe in a future untouched by betrayal, and Nick faced the terrifying possibility that the truth about his addiction could permanently alter how his family saw him. Meanwhile, Phyllis moved closer and closer toward another potentially destructive mistake, despite Lauren's desperate attempts to pull her back before everything collapsed. The atmosphere surrounding everyone felt heavy with anticipation, as though a single wrong move could trigger devastation that would ripple through the entire city. Every conversation carried hidden tension, every glance concealed suspicion, and every secret seemed ready to explode into the open. And as Friday's episode of The Young and the Restless pushed each character deeper into emotional uncertainty, one thing became painfully clear. The chaos unfolding in Genoa City was only beginning. The emotional fallout from Las Vegas continued to spread through Genoa City like a gathering storm, leaving every character caught between fear, regret, and the desperate need to hold their lives together before everything shattered completely. Inside the tense silence surrounding Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson, the conversation only grew more emotionally charged as the weight of the past pressed harder against their future. Chelsea wanted to believe Adam's promises, but trust had never come easily between them, especially after everything they had survived over the years. Even though Adam spoke with sincerity about wanting a stable life with Chelsea and Connor Newman, the shadow of Spider still lingered in the room like a ghost refusing to disappear. Chelsea could not ignore how naturally Adam had slipped back into that dangerous identity while they were in Vegas, and part of her feared that version of him might never truly be gone. Every reassurance Adam offered felt heartfelt, yet there was still an ache beneath Chelsea's composure. A quiet fear that one wrong moment could drag them right back into chaos. The deeper Adam tried to explain himself, the more obvious it became that he was not only fighting to save his relationship, but also trying to convince himself that he had finally escaped the darkness of the man he used to be. For Adam, the emotional stakes were painfully high, because losing Chelsea now would mean losing the future he had been trying so desperately to build. There was a vulnerability in him that rarely surfaced, a quiet desperation hidden beneath his confidence, as he admitted how much his life had changed since the days when danger and manipulation defined him. He acknowledged that Spider had once embraced a reckless lifestyle filled with temporary thrills and emotional detachment, but he insisted that person no longer represented who he wanted to be. The memories of Vegas still haunted him, not because of Reza Thompson, but because returning to that world forced him to confront parts of himself he wished had stayed buried forever. Chelsea listened carefully, caught between love and fear, trying to determine whether Adam's transformation was truly permanent or simply another temporary illusion. The emotional tension between them became almost unbearable because both of them understood that trust once broken could never be repaired overnight. Yet somewhere beneath the uncertainty, there was still undeniable love holding them together, fragile but powerful enough to keep them fighting for one another, despite the emotional damage surrounding them. Elsewhere, the atmosphere at the GCAC carried its own dangerous tension, as Nick Newman found himself standing dangerously close to a truth that could ignite another explosive confrontation. Across the bar, Phyllis Summers remained engaged in conversation with Matt Clark, completely unaware of how close disaster might be. The room buzzed with ordinary conversation and movement, but beneath that surface normalcy was a growing sense of unease that refused to settle. Nick's instincts told him something was wrong the moment he noticed the interaction, and his protective side immediately began to surface. Matt's return to Genoa City already carried an unsettling energy, especially given the uncertainty surrounding his memory loss and his suspicious behavior. If Nick confronted him publicly, emotions could spiral out of control in seconds, especially if Matt continued hiding behind his claims of amnesia. The mere thought of Matt manipulating the people around him again filled Nick with frustration and suspicion, because deep down, he feared there was far more happening beneath the surface than anyone realized. At the same time, Phyllis herself seemed drawn toward danger in a way that worried nearly everyone around her. There was always something unpredictable about Phyllis when emotions took control, and lately, her choices had become increasingly reckless. Lauren Fenmore Baldwin could see the warning signs becoming impossible to ignore, and her growing concerns stemmed not only from the legal drama unfolding around them, but also from the dangerous people Phyllis continued allowing into her orbit. Lauren understood better than most how quickly situations could spiral once Phyllis became emotionally invested in something she believed she could control. Watching her interact with Matt only intensified Lauren's fears, because Matt carried an unsettling darkness that made every encounter feel unpredictable. There was a growing sense that Phyllis was walking directly into another emotional disaster, without fully realizing the consequences waiting ahead. Despite Lauren's repeated attempts to caution her, Phyllis seemed determined to follow her instincts, even if those instincts ultimately pushed her closer to chaos. The emotional frustration Lauren felt became increasingly visible because she knew that once Phyllis committed herself to a path, convincing her to turn back was almost impossible. Meanwhile, another emotional reckoning slowly approached for the Newman family as Nick prepared to reveal the truth about the darkest chapter of his recent life. When he finally met with Victoria Newman, the conversation promised to carry devastating emotional weight. Nick had spent so much time hiding the extent of his suffering, pretending he could manage everything alone while quietly unraveling inside. But the truth about his drug addiction and the near-fatal spiral he experienced in Vegas could no longer remain buried. Victoria had always seen her brother as strong and dependable, someone capable of carrying enormous pressure without breaking, which made the reality of his struggles even more heartbreaking. As Nick opened up about how close he came to dying, the emotional walls around both siblings threatened to collapse under the sheer weight of the confession. The vulnerability in Nick's voice would reveal a man exhausted from fighting his demons in silence, while Victoria faced the terrifying realization that she nearly lost her brother without even knowing how badly he was suffering. In that moment, the polished image of the powerful Newman family faded away, replaced by something painfully human. Fear, grief, love, and the desperate need to protect the people who matter most. As every storyline moved closer to collision, Genoa City itself began to feel emotionally suffocating, as though secrets and tension were pressing in from every direction. Trust hung by a thread, hidden motives lurked beneath polite conversations, and nearly every relationship seemed vulnerable to collapse. Adam and Chelsea fought desperately to preserve the fragile future they still hoped to build together, while Nick battled the emotional consequences of finally exposing his deepest pain. Phyllis continued drifting toward dangerous territory despite repeated warnings, and Lauren watched helplessly as the situation threatened to spiral beyond anyone's control. Meanwhile, Matt's mysterious return cast a dark shadow over everything, leaving uncertainty and suspicion lingering in every corner of the city. Each emotional confrontation carried the potential to change lives forever, and every secret waiting beneath the surface threatened to explode at the worst possible moment. By the time Friday's episode of The Young and the Restless reached its final moments, the emotional stakes had risen higher than ever, leaving viewers with the unmistakable feeling that even greater chaos, heartbreak, and shocking revelations were still waiting just ahead. As night slowly settled over Genoa City, the emotional fractures running through everyone's lives became harder and harder to hide, and the atmosphere surrounding the Newman family felt especially fragile. The city itself seemed unusually restless, as though every hallway, every dimly lit office, and every quiet corner carried whispers of secrets preparing to erupt into the open. For Chelsea Lawson, the conversation with Adam Newman continued echoing in her mind long after the words were spoken. Even though Adam had reassured her again and again that Riza Thompson meant nothing to him, Chelsea could still feel the emotional sting left behind by the entire ordeal. There was something deeply unsettling about realizing how convincingly Adam had stepped back into the identity of Spider, as if that dangerous version of himself still lived just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge again. Chelsea wanted desperately to believe that the man standing in front of her now was different from the one who once thrived on chaos and manipulation. But fear has a way of lingering long after promises are made. And as she looked into Adam's eyes, she could see how badly he wanted her trust. Yet she could also sense his quiet fear that one mistake might destroy everything they had rebuilt together. Adam himself seemed emotionally exhausted from constantly having to defend the man he had become. Beneath his calm exterior was the unmistakable weight of someone carrying years of regret, guilt, and unresolved darkness. Returning to the world of Spider in Vegas had forced him to confront memories and instincts he wished he could erase forever. And now those memories threatened to poison the fragile peace he had finally found with Chelsea and Connor Newman. Adam tried to explain that every risky move in Vegas had been necessary, every flirtation and every deception carefully calculated for survival. But even he understood why Chelsea struggled to separate performance from reality. The emotional tension between them deepened because both of them were fighting different battles at the same time. Chelsea was fighting to trust again, while Adam was fighting to prove that he truly deserved that trust. And somewhere underneath the pain and uncertainty, there was still love. Complicated, scarred, imperfect love, holding them together even as fear threatened to pull them apart. It was the kind of emotional struggle that neither dramatic speeches nor quick reassurances could fix overnight, because some wounds take time to heal, no matter how badly two people want to move forward. Across town, the tension surrounding Nick Newman continued building with every passing moment, especially after his unsettling glimpse toward the GCAC bar. Whether he fully recognized Matt Clark or not, the encounter left a lingering unease in Nick's mind that refused to disappear. Matt's presence in Genoa City felt wrong on every level, and instinctively, Nick sensed that his return would bring trouble crashing down on multiple lives. Meanwhile, Phyllis Summers remained dangerously close to the center of that storm, once again allowing herself to get tangled in something unpredictable and potentially destructive. There had always been a reckless emotional intensity inside Phyllis, a tendency to chase answers or excitement even when danger was staring her directly in the face. That same intensity now threatened to push her deeper into Matt's orbit, despite all the warning signs surrounding him. Every interaction between them carried an uncomfortable undercurrent, as though Matt was quietly pulling her towards something darker, while Phyllis convinced herself she could stay in control. But Genoa City had seen this pattern before, and too often, the people who believed they were handling danger ended up consumed by it instead. Not far away, Lauren Fenmore Baldwin watched the situation unfold with growing frustration and dread. Lauren had seen enough chaos over the years to recognize when someone was heading toward disaster, and all her instincts were screaming that Phyllis was making another catastrophic mistake. The legal drama already swirling around them was dangerous enough on its own, but Matt's involvement added an entirely different level of unpredictability. Lauren worried not only about what Phyllis might uncover, but also about how emotionally invested she was becoming in the entire situation. The more determined Phyllis became, the harder it would be for anyone to stop her from crossing lines she might later regret. Lauren's concern came from genuine care, but there was also exhaustion behind it, because trying to save Phyllis from herself had become an endless cycle over the years. She knew how fiercely independent Phyllis could be, how stubbornly she clung to her instincts, even when everyone around her begged her to slow down. And yet, Lauren could not simply stand by in silence while the warning signs grew louder and more alarming by the day. At the heart of the emotional storm, however, was the painful truth Nick Newman was finally preparing to share with Victoria Newman. For so long, Nick had hidden his addiction behind carefully controlled smiles and quiet avoidance, convincing himself he could carry the burden alone without dragging his family into his pain. But the truth about Vegas had become impossible to suppress. The addiction had nearly destroyed him completely, pushing him so close to death that even now, the memory still haunted him. When Nick finally opened up to Victoria, the emotional impact threatened to break both of them. Victoria listened with growing horror as her brother admitted just how badly he had spiraled, how isolated and lost he had become while privately fighting a battle no one else fully understood. The realization that she almost lost him without even knowing the depth of his suffering hit her with devastating force. In that raw and vulnerable moment, all the power, wealth, and confidence associated with the Newman name suddenly meant nothing at all. They were no longer business titans or members of a legendary family. They were simply brother and sister, clinging to each other through fear, heartbreak, and the terrifying awareness of how close tragedy had truly come. As Friday's episode of The Young and the Restless moved toward its final emotional crescendo, every storyline seemed poised on the edge of eruption. Adam and Chelsea stood at a crossroads between healing and heartbreak, desperately trying to protect the fragile life they still hoped to build together. Nick's confession threatened to permanently reshape the emotional dynamics within the Newman family, while Victoria struggled to process the pain her brother had hidden for so long. Phyllis continued drifting toward dangerous territory with Matt, despite Lauren's growing desperation to pull her back before disaster struck. And hanging over all of it was the unmistakable feeling that Genoa City was heading toward another major collision of secrets, betrayal, and emotional devastation. The silence between conversations felt heavier. The glances between characters carried deeper suspicion, and every unresolved tension seemed ready to ignite at any moment. By the time the episode faded into its final moments, viewers were left with a chilling sense that the emotional chaos gripping Genoa City was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning to reveal how destructive it could truly become.